Hello everybody and welcome back to KXP, Kerbal Exploration Program where we aim to explore the furthest reaches of the cosmos. And today we set our sight on Minmus. In the last episode we landed at Kerbal on the Mun, and that kind of proves to us that we have the capability of achieving Minmus as well. So that is exactly what we're going to do. We are going to take our scientist Bob and design a new craft and achieve that goal. But before we can get started on that, we have a chunk of science to unlock, as well as a few small missions to do before we get into the bulk of today's episode. So first, I'm going to unlock quite a few things, so instead of focusing on all my looking around, I'm just going to show you what we got. I really want to get heavier rocketry, but that is going to require me to upgrade my VAB in order to unlock. We can do it. We have enough money. However, it does leave us in a little bit of a pinch. We got to make sure that we can afford to launch a rocket. So anyways, we are going to pick up propulsion systems for the Terra engine. We're going to pick up electrics for the foldable solar panels, as well as some of the communication dishes. Space exploration because it's good. Advanced exploration because it gives us the mobile processing lab, which will be useful later. Miniaturization for the science experiments. And heavier rocketry, because having access to these big engines will make launches easier. Advanced construction, because that gives us access to some docking ports, as well as a few better radial decouplers, but more importantly, it leads us to actuators. Unfortunately, we don't have enough science to unlock it, hence why we're going to be doing a few small missions before we can. So let's jump into the space hangar. I built a Lynx rover. This is a mod pack by the same name, and we just packed it full of science. So we're going to fill it with all of our Kerbals and collect a few experiments on the runway and on the KSC. So this will pick up some of the science. We had 124 and we need 160. This is my first time experimenting with the Lynx. I wasn't too much of a fan of it. It does flip over very easily. I'm going to have to figure a better way to build it, possibly, but it seems like there's only one way to build it. But it did seem like it was also modular from the mod page, so I'm not sure. I'll have to explore a little bit more. But anyways, we flipped ourselves over into a new biome, and so we can go ahead and run our science experiments, and then call it a day. Recover the craft, recover the crew. There's not much to be gotten, but the seismic span and the target scanning and the mystery goo pick up some residuals that they had left off. Also, in the last episode, we upgraded the administration building, but we forgot to take a third program. So we are going to take the Minmus program, because that is where we aim to visit today. So this is going to help bolster our mission and our funds from it. So we got the Minmus program, To Boldly Go, which is all about science and new biomes, and then massive scale launches for large tonnage. Once you get to orbit, you get funds for heavier rockets. So to pick up the last of the science, we're going to make a sounding rocket with a bunch of new experiments, including the bathymetry, which is from D Magic's Orbital Science mod. So we just make a quick little sounding rocket to go down range, drop off this little probe in the water, and collect some science. And then that picks up some of it. And then to get the last little chunk, we go ahead and take that Lynx rover and send it to the desert launch site to once again do science, go very quickly, and flip. I have to say it's pretty resilient with its flipping, but still, I don't like it flipping. So now that we have enough science, we can unlock actuators, which is part of the Breaking Ground DLC, and it adds robotic parts, but that is something that we're going to make use of. So now it is time to do the build. I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this build sequence than I do normally. Time-lapse is going to be a little bit faster. But that's because we've gotten so much of a mission ahead of us that I wanted to focus all my time on that, but to do so would make it even longer than an episode than it is already. So We are just going to go a little bit faster through this. Currently, we're just making a typical Mach 1 capsule. We lowered the ablator on our heat shield, but thankfully this time it's not as much of a problem. Our plan is to return our Kerbal home. We do not want to strand them. We're not going to leave them intentionally or unintentionally and have to send a rescue craft. So this top stage is all about what we're going to bring home. So we're going to go ahead and arm our parachutes. There was an update to Real Shoot recently, and so now I think you no longer need to use the action groups to set them. You can actually just use the actual right-click menu. See, right here. So I'm not entirely sure if that was in that or if something else changed, but there was an update to it, so I assume it was that. So we go ahead and name this the Minmus Lander V1 and get more of our action groups set up. That little science experiment holder at the top is going to carry the data from our science. I've been using him more frequently now that I've gotten used to it, but by the press of a button, you can collect all the data on your craft into that. So now we're setting up the cargo bay with all of our experiments. We're just going to bring 2 of each type, put them on their own action groups, numbers 2 and 3. And then throw some batteries in there for extra power, attach our magnetometer booms to the batteries, sink them in so they're not peeking out of the doors, remove them from their symmetry, and put them in. And then we also have access to the Science Junior, so we're going to put that on, which is why we're going to be taking Bob instead of Jeb or Valentina, because Bob will be able to reset the experiments. We also have these little high and low altitude experiments from D-Magix, so we're going to add those on top, and or on the sides, excuse me. So we're going to go ahead and make some more changes to our action groups. It's very important with a mission of this caliber. And then with all that done, we are going to go ahead and bring in the fuel and the engine. So now it's just a simple small size tank with a Terrier engine, but that is enough to get us from Minmus orbit back home. And I know that. So as long as we can get that tiny little piece into low Minmus orbit, we're good. And so these side tanks with their fuel line attached in the center is going to be what we use to go between Kerbin and Minmus, as well as land on Minmus, as well as ascend back from the surface to a low Minmus orbit. If we can manage any more fuel in between there, we will hop to different biomes and collect more science. So what you see me building here is a satellite that, a communication satellite that I hope to leave in high Minmus orbit to kind of pave the way for our satellite program, our satellite network to start from. Having something in a nice polar orbit to give signal, even just occasionally, is going to be a good start. So we're going to go ahead and make the most advanced satellite that we've done so far, now that we have access to movable parts. So we're going to go ahead and make this little arm extension, and this will allow our solar panels to extend past our communication dishes, making sure that the communication dishes don't cause any shadows on the solar panels, giving them the maximum amount of coverage that they can possibly have. So now it's time, we're going to put that into a fairing because it's too delicate for ascent, but we're not going to put the capsule, the Mach 1 capsule, or any part of that in a fairing. So instead we're just going to have this tall little payload on top. I take the solar panels and I move them to the outer tanks, and then 2 on the inner craft for return home. However, I don't need to have the retractable solar panels at all. I could have just done the basic ones that cannot retract because those ones are cheaper, and since we're not going to be taking them through any atmosphere, it's just kind of a waste of money. So Here is what I figured would be our interplanetary stage, but instead it's going to be part of our circularization burn, and so that's I do end up building it out a little bit more, giving it a little more fuel after the simulation. So we went ahead and did a simulation all the way from low Kerbal orbit all the way to the end of the mission. So here you see me making some of the adjustments of some of the problems that we had in it. And one of those adjustments is auto-strutting the entirety of the craft. So just as a quick PSA, I would recommend auto-strutting as you go along, especially when dealing with long, with crafts that are long and made of many objects, like that satellite was made out of many batteries. Just auto-strut as you go along, and that will make life a lot easier. So now we don't have access to landing legs that were long enough to attach to the side tank and clear the gap of the Terrier engine. So we are going to use the hinge and the piston to create our own. And we attach them to the gear action group, so now all we have to do is press G and they will act as landing gear. A little trick if you have the Breaking Ground DLC. I've never used Infernal Robotics, but I believe they have the same parts, so if you don't have the Breaking Ground DLC, then you can do that as well. So now here we are, creating our lifting vehicle. This will get us into low Kerbal orbit, or at least close enough. I start off by putting on some SRBs. We have access to some pretty heavy ones now that we have unlocked heavier rocketry. So we go ahead and throw some parachutes on there in order to hopefully recover the stage. However, I decide to get rid of that in favor of some liquid fuel engines and a fuel tank, or a fuel line in between to refuel our center tank. So that's what we do. We go ahead and copy the engine that we're using for the center, so it's just 3 of the same kind. And then we copy our side tanks and make them asparagus stage into each other for maximum efficiency of our vehicle. So let's go ahead and get this thing out on the launch pad. So at the break of dawn, Bob Kerman climbs into the capsule of the very cleverly named Minmus lander. We go ahead and go into IVA mode. However, we're not really going to be spending much time of this flight in IVA. However, in the following episodes, we will be doing more IVA modes. I kind of want to do a little half and half since we don't have a KXP POV series right now. I still want to take advantage of some of our IVA flying, and I don't want to get rusty before we do Season 4. So I'll just occasionally pop into IVA mode in this series. But for this mission, we're going to be doing it mostly in third person. And unfortunately, none of the game audio recorded during this mission, so there will be no engine sounds, no Kerbal chatter, no clicks, no beeps, no boops. Apologize about that, and I'm going to be keeping a better eye on my recordings from here on out. But nonetheless, we have a nice series of songs for our soundtrack, and my lovely voice to keep you company. So since this is kind of a pretty typical ascent, we're going to go ahead and skip forward to the actual circularization of it. And we're also going to be skipping fairly quickly to get to Minmus, because we've already done this once before with a probe, and some of the steps many times before, just in general. So we want to kind of keep our progress going. What you see here with our solar panel is I accidentally attached a strut to one of the robotic parts, and it is the robotic part is really fighting to extend, while the strut is really fighting to keep it in place. So how we manage this is we aim our camera at the part, and then when we right click on the strut, we have an option to disconnect, and that fixed the problem. And just in time, I fixed the problem just in time to activate our circularization burn. And it actually requires much more delta V than I had anticipated. So what was supposed to be our Minmus stage ends up being the majority of our circularization burn. And we even have to use some of our landing fuel to circularize. And so we're going to also have to use that fuel to change our inclination and arrive at Minmus. What you just saw on the screen there was I got 40,000 funds because I launched a vessel weighing more than, 40 tons, I believe? I believe it's any vessel over 40 tons, you get 40,000. Maybe I'm just confusing that with the 40. But either way, that is part of the strategy program for massive scale launches. So now we are going pretty quickly. We're just going to change our inclination and then head on our way to Minmus. So as you see here, we're lowering our relative inclination until it's as low as possible, and then it skips up ahead a little bit. But nonetheless, we're at 0.10, it looks like? Yeah. So let's plot out our transfer, focus on the planet, and then make a small adjustment where you want to come in at a polar inclination because that's how we want to leave our communication satellite. So go ahead and plot in that maneuver, and we're going to go ahead and turn ourselves using the remote text flight computer to automate the burn. So we're going to time warp our way forward to the other side of the planet into the darkness, burning our way towards Minmus. Skipping ahead until we finish our burn. Then we're going to do a mid-course correction and kind of adjust a few parts to it. Just really finalize the way that we want to come in. So here we are, adding a little normal and then a little retrograde. That brings us to 1 million. 1 million meters is our goal for our altitude. And there we have it. I could be at a better inclination, and I will change that eventually. But for now, we're just going to plot in our burn, time warp our way away from Kerbal, towards Minmus, towards our node. We had to turn off all the engines except for the center one, and we even lowered the thrust on that because it was so small of a burn we didn't want to overshoot it. So now we're going to plot in our circularization maneuver for Minmus and time warp our way there. And the minty green ball comes speeding up towards us. We slow down our time as we approach and get ready to capture. And looking at our map, takes us no time at all to capture. I accidentally tap the Z key once everything was all done, so let's go ahead and extend that back out to get a very circularized orbit. Some of it is below 1 million, but that's fine. It doesn't need to be exact. But I don't like the inclination that it's at. It's at too funky of an angle. I want it to be very polar, so let's go ahead and change that. A little anti-normal burn, pretty easy, not a lot of delta V required. We only have half of our center tank left, which means that we have pretty much the same in all the others, but that fuel line between them means that our center tank will refill when we jettison our side tanks. So that's something to look forward to. But anyways, now that we're in the right position, we're going to make sure that all of our communication dishes are attached to a source, either Kerbal, active vessel, Minmus, or the MUN, and then we go ahead and separate. So now this will stay in that orbit and hopefully transfer information from this moon back to the Kerbal. except for the fact that there's no connection. These communication dishes are powerful, but our network back home isn't powerful enough to reach these ones. So we're going to have to redo our home network before that satellite can make any use. But nonetheless, we go ahead and do some science in high space. We're going to go get Bob out on EVA so we can restore and collect the data. Do a little EVA report. And we forgot to do the automatic collection. So we're going to go ahead and hop back in the canister and do that. And then that way, Bob, all he has to do is restore the science. However, we're starting to get options to collect the data. And that should be my first clue that something is amiss. Another mod that we're using and that we will use more in the future is the free IVA mod, which allows the Kerbals to unclip themselves from the seat and float around the capsule. In the Mach 1 capsule, there's not really much to do. It's just too small, too cramped, not a lot. So we're not going to get very much use of it until we start dealing with larger capsules or rover interiors. But anyways, we have ourselves another maneuver to do, lowering at the surface. We want to get close because we want to land. Let's go ahead and time warp our way up to our apoapsis, which is when we are going the slowest in our orbit, which will mean that when we're trying to slow ourselves down, it is going to be the most efficient place in our orbit to do so. Using all 4 engines, all 5 engines, it takes no time at all. We end up having a thrust to weight ratio of somewhere about 44, which is pretty intense. It's only going to take 55 meters per second of delta V to circularize at below 20 kilometers above the surface, which will make landing nice and easy. But as I mentioned before, a thrust to weight ratio of 44. To put that into context for anyone who might not be familiar with thrust to weight ratios, it takes over 1. You have to be over 1 in order to lift something off the surface of the planet Earth. 1. When you're on a moon like this, when you're in something that has no atmosphere, you don't even need to have a thrust to weight of 1. You can have very, very low thrust to weight, and as long as you have enough fuel to get it going, you'll eventually go. But 44 on a moon like Minmus is a little overkill. We are going to be definitely going to be able to stop our momentum. So let's go ahead and do our science in low space over Minmus, and once again get Bob out to collect everything and restore. All those orange lines in the top left are errors that cannot process the science, cannot take it in. Either we have a copy of it already, or it just does not have enough room. So I will eventually learn that we ran out of space and I need to carry more capacity with me because we are not going to be getting all of the science that we collect, unfortunately. Lessons to learn for each time as you go. So now we are going to go ahead and plot in our landing maneuver. I want to land somewhere near these Great Flats. However, I don't want to land in the Great Flats. Not initially anyways. I want to land somewhere, like I mentioned, if we have enough fuel, which we seem to, I'd like to take this hopping around to a couple different biomes if possible. At least one extra biome. Get all the science we can. That was the goal, and that's what I have in store currently in the gameplay that you see, because I didn't know that I was running out of space, so I'm just figuring, let's grab all the science we can. Alright, so now we got Bob safely back into the capsule. We return him once more. Some of the experiments can be repeated over different biomes. Some of them cannot, and so I'm just running the science over and over again, just collecting whatever is available and dumping whatever is a duplicate. We have a nice little curve and rise over the surface as we approach our maneuver. Have to, of course, orbit around to the other side. A lot of nice texture with the parallax mod. Even in low orbit, you can see some of the details that has been added. Also, just being able to play on high graphics, this is the best my game has ever looked, and so it's very nice. I've been really enjoying coming to all these different planets. Let's go ahead and time warp closer. Do a set of science experiments over the greater flats. And go ahead and get them on EVA. Collect the stuff. Very dangerous because we have plotted in our maneuver into remote tech, which means that it's going to happen no matter what. If we are hanging off on the surface when it happens, we will most likely be ripped off the craft and have a very bad time. Thankfully, we had enough time to get back into the capsule, store our material or our experiments, and get ourselves ready for our landing. And it's only going to take 52.7 meters per second of delta V. We have over 1,000, so we'll be good. I think this mission is more than capable. So we do science one more time because now we are above the shores. Let's go ahead and get Bob out on another EVA, take an EVA report, because those are definitely over each biome you can take a new one, so those are good. And collect the data and restore each science experiment, all while on a suborbital trajectory, which is very risky. I kind of miss playing with Earn Your Stripes because it was fun to see all the different achievements that each Kerbal did. And I definitely think Bob would be getting one for doing an EVA on a suborbital trajectory. That's pretty risky. So now I'm going to try to retract everything for landing, just tighten everything up, make sure that we don't have anything that can break off or disrupt ourselves, especially the solar panels. We're going to need those. So I start by retracting them individually when I remember that we have a mod that allows you to retract them all. So we're going to go ahead and extend them right back out again. And then once they're ready, we hit retract all, and then that takes care of everything. So now we're going to go ahead and get the trajectories mod ready, and it seems like we are going to be landing on the hill that we wanted to. That's nice. Let's get our landing information ready and in the place, and we are actually going to go ahead and bring that up and make it a little bit larger and easier to see. The most important thing, the most important numbers to pay attention to is the suicide burn countdown on the lower screen of the landing info. That is our last chance maneuver. If we miss that, then we are going to impact. So it's important not to miss that. But you also have information such as our altitude, our speed, time to impact, that sort of stuff. All you missed there was I wasn't able to turn on my SAS because our remote tech still had us pointed at our previous maneuver. And apparently I never set our communications dishes to point anywhere, so they had been sitting dead that whole time. So we get rid of trajectories because we're pretty sure of where we are going to land. Everything is safe. I don't feel like we're going to come down on any slope or anything too difficult. So now I have about a minute until our suicide burn, and a little bit over that to our impact. So we're just gonna kind of cruise down with it and get ready. As we get close enough to the surface, we are going to start seeing bits and pieces of the scatter that comes from the parallax mod. And we have our collisions turned on, so each of those pieces of scatter will have some sort of effect on the craft. So if we land sideways on one of them, we will actually be sideways. We can't just phase through like you can normally. There we are in our little stony field. I kick on our engines early, 19 seconds early, because I want to test our thrust to weight ratio, which, like I mentioned before, very high. Currently it's at 38.65. It'll only get higher from there. So it's not going to take very much to slow this thing down. In fact, it will take a little more skill to not be rocketing back towards Kerbal at that point. So 5 seconds to suicide burn. Coming in fairly fast. I get a little nervous, so at 1.7 seconds I hit burn, but instantly cancel out all of my momentum. So I have to wait a second before turning my engines on again, and turn it on a little too much, and like I mentioned, start heading back upwards. So it doesn't take very much effort to land this thing. The effort is actually to come down slowly enough. But anyways, here we are on the surface of Minmus. We did our science, we did our little collection. We are going to get Bob out of the capsule, plant a flag, take a surface sample, and then set his eyes on a different biome. It kind of hurts me to think about how much data we could have had. This is about the time when I start to realize that we are running out of space and I can't store all the data that we're collecting, unfortunately. So when we board, we have to dump some experiments. But we move on to planting our flag, conquering yet another celestial body in the name of exploration. Unfortunately, I forgot to change the mission flag to be the Minmus flag, so instead we plant the Kerbal flag on the surface. But this won't be the last time that we visit this place. In fact, we may actually set up shop here. We have extraplanetary launch pads, the mod extraplanetary launch pads installed, meaning that we can eventually build off-world ships or crafts of any kind. So it might be worth our while to set up a little Minmus colony, a little base of operations, a little way to launch into deep space for a little bit cheaper. So now we are looking at the map. I want to land in the Greater Flats. There is one close to us, but it's kind of isolated from the rest of the terrain, and so we're gonna aim for the big one, because I'd like to start scoping out places for our base, and I think that set of flats is going to offer us the best. So we launch straight up so I can just kind of get a better view of which direction to go. See, we see there, that's the small one, so now I know that if I head the direction that we are looking on screen, not the direction the craft is pointed, but the direction that we are headed now, I should be able to get towards that other flat area. Is the singular of a flats a flat, or is it still flats? Because it's the greater flats. Asking the big questions here. I know. So let's go ahead and burn, and then that brings us into the flats. However, that lands us into the dark side. So I want to adjust my maneuver. I plotted out, but I'm not going to use the maneuver to... I just wanted to see which direction I needed to point in order to do that. And we're just going to eyeball it and burn anti-normal. And now that we are in more of a light side, we can point ourselves retrograde and adjust it further. Yep, just floating through. It's very peaceful. It's very nice to see. I can't wait to visit other moons and further destinations. Okay, so now we're starting to come a little bit closer. I brought up the landing info once more to a larger size so you can see where our time to impact is. We're going to put on trajectories once more and kind of eyeball our descent. I'm going to point horizontally and kind of burn off our horizontal momentum, but then I decide to burn a little bit farther and bring us closer to the slope. My goal was just to land on the flat part because that would be the easiest to take off from, but I'm going to squeeze in one biome in between that and try to land on this slope here. Because we can land and then do some quick science, and if anything goes wrong we can just take off immediately, and our emergency landing will be in the slopes or in the flats, so it'll be a lot better. We're aiming for right at the edge here. I want to actually land on the slope, however, so I will have to adjust that soon enough. We've got 3 seconds to our suicide burn. At 1.5 seconds, I activate, and then I kill, and then I activate again. And we're just popping it on and off to slow our descent, because this thing can move very quickly. So here you are. You see me adjusting that trajectory so that way we can land on that angle, the different biome, which happens to be the lowlands. Point ourselves retrograde, get ourselves ready to land. We got 10 seconds to burn, 11 seconds to impact, 5 seconds. We go ahead and kick on our engine, slow ourselves down more gradually instead of relying on a suicide burn. And once again, we come to a solid stop. Very successful piloting by both Bob and the KSC, because we have a probe core on here. So it depends on what you want to believe, whether or not it is Bob piloting the craft or the probe core that is guiding him and he is just along for the ride. I mean, it's not me, of course. I'm not, I'm just watching. I'm just, relaying to you what these Kerbals have been doing. So there we go. We had to dump a few experiments, unfortunately. So now we're going to go through and look at the experiments we have and clear out anything that we don't need, because we should have done that already. I tried to transmit some of the experiments, but unfortunately the communications dish we have isn't strong enough to reach Kerbin. So the only way that we're going to be able to get the science is to take it home safely. So now that we got our science from the lowlands, we're just going to take off ever so slightly, land in the Minmus flats, do our last little bit of science, and then think about heading home. But I don't need to go that far away. In fact, I'd prefer not to. I kind of want to just land right where I'm at, because I didn't want to risk taking Bob out on EVA and potentially tipping the craft over because it was at such an angle. So I wasn't able to get a surface sample. So what we're going to do is we're going to land very close right here, do all of our science experiments, and then I'm going to have Bob just kind of head over there and take a surface sample. So once again, 5 seconds to suicide burn. And too powerful of an engine. See, now our surface thrust to weight is almost 46. So it really would have helped to turn down, to turn up the thrust limiter on this, but we don't do that in this mission, unfortunately. It just, I knew about it, I thought about it, but I just, for some reason, didn't do it. So instead, I struggle with this. Not really too much of a problem, but it's can be very frustrating to change direction so rapidly. But thankfully, this is our last destination. So now all we need to do is get ourselves into a low Minmus orbit, go into a high Kerbal orbit, bring it back down to a low Kerbal orbit, circularize, and re-enter. And hopefully we will have enough fuel for that. I think we will. We've got our fuel lines that will take us. We have 700 some odd delta V. We got a bunch of science. So I think it's ready to take this Kerbal home. Let's collect everything we can. Restore our materials, science bay, as well as our mystery goo. Try to balance out our science as best we can and have to dump everything else. The last thing that we need to do before we go is get Bob out one last time, float over to the slope over here, collect a surface sample, and take an EVA report. Once again, I'm not even sure that we're going to be able to collect that data just because of our lack of space, but it'll feel good to have done it and not have it rather than not have done it and not have it. So let's go ahead and take that, get those all set. No need to plant a flag here. We've already gotten... Bob's already laid his claim to his landing site. He'll let someone else have these ones. So I try to get him back in the ship, but for some reason he got knocked off to the side. So he tries to take a little photo for posterity, but none of them really seem to work out. So let's just get him back in the capsule and focus on getting home. But he's pretty happy. It's been a successful mission so far, and if all goes according to plan, he'll definitely get a Medal of Honor for this trip. So grabbing back onto the ladder, pulling himself back in, easy enough. Take one last look at our craft, take a crew report on the Minmus flaps. Turn our engine on and full throttle. Takes nothing to lift off from the surface, as well we know, so we go ahead and point horizontally immediately and feel like we don't have our engines on for very long. I feel like we didn't have them on at all, but we definitely have an escape trajectory from both Minmus and Kerbal, so we're gonna have to fix that real fast. So we're gonna flip retrograde and burn for a mere second, and that was enough to cancel our exit of Minmus. So we're gonna point prograde and just tap the throttle. So there we go. So now we are going to be in a high orbit of Kerbal. And then from there we will make our maneuvers and head home. But for now, let's just say goodbye to Minmus. We'll be back here soon enough. In the next episode, I plan to send a few more Kerbals on a mission out here. So we'll be back soon. I managed to change my skybox. It was the Milky Way skybox, but now I changed it to the Deep Nebula. So things will be a little bluer than they used to, but the stars are a little more visible. So, and I love that as I'm saying that there's not a single star visible in sight, but you really see it in the map view. So oddly enough, we have an intercept with the Mud, and so that's going to slingshot us into a lower orbit around Kerbal. So we get ready with a nice cinematic view and time warp our way into a flyby, and just kind of enjoy the beauty of the celestial planets and the orbital mechanics that brought us there. So now we're in a much lower orbit than we were before, thanks to that little flyby. So now we are going to plot our lowering of our periapsis. This is going to bring us down just above the atmosphere. Takes no time at all. We use up the last of our side boosters. We're going to add a maneuver here at the periapsis to circularize. We have no fuel in our side boosters, but I don't pay attention to that very much. And we keep them on for now as we descend to just the edge of the atmosphere. We're not actually in the atmosphere yet, so we will not be coming in yet, but soon enough. So right at the Twilight Zone, we end up initiating our burn. Get a nice view of the sunset as we come around. And almost as soon as the lights go out, the engines will come on. Well, I guess we did have a little bit of fuel left in those side tanks, because all 5 engines ignited. Yeah. Just I was looking over at the side and it looked like it was empty. But now that they're empty, we go ahead and jettison them. And they have explosives attached to them, so they go ahead and detonate, clearing up any space debris that we don't have to take care of in the tracking station. Very nice. Honestly, TAC explosives is a great mod for any build, but I would highly recommend it for people with lower end PCs. It does help clear up and clean up trash very easily. You can avoid having all those extra pieces in the tracking station from the get-go. Like, it's very useful. So we couldn't get we couldn't land at the KSC. Unfortunately, we weren't on a correct enough plane, but we could land close enough to the Desert Launch Complex, so we set in a burn to try to precision land there. So I'm retracting everything, forgetting that I had an action group until I get to the bay door, so that's when I press the action group, which arms the parachutes, closes the bay doors, and collects any remaining science that was in the experiments. So with plenty of Delta V, we go ahead and burn for our landing. As the camera changes, it confirms that we will be on an impact trajectory. We use the trajectories mod, and we see that we are landing just a little bit farther than the Desert Launch Complex, but I know that that will change once we jettison our lower engine. However, in hindsight, I think we could have kept it a little bit longer than we did. We had we could have afforded to burn off a little more, or to have kept a little more momentum. Looking in the IVA mode, we had a nice view of Kerbal. I can't wait till we have better capsules with better windows and we can see even more. So time warping till we hit the atmosphere, and we got to see a little bit of lightning there where I circled. If you missed it, just hit the back arrow key and you should get that perfectly. But here we are now, seeing that our landing is still correct. So we're going to point ourselves radial out, so that way our lower stage goes below us. I like to have it on a different plane when I separate, so I don't like to separate things in the prograde or retrograde direction. So there we go, we're at 62 kilometers, and we go ahead and separate and then point ourselves retrograde. Our trajectory didn't really change all that much from losing the lower stage. However, once we start aero braking, it will change considerably. So now there's nothing left to do. There's nothing we can do except ride the heat in, watch our lower stage disappear, fall through the clouds, and hope our parachutes catch in time. I did mention that I lowered the ablator, however, that is not too much of a problem given the fact that we came in at such a low angle. That is more than enough ablator than we had. The problem that I had in that previous episode is the angle that we came in was very high, and I wasn't planning on coming in at that high of an angle. But we have a nice low orbit around Kerbal when we came in, so the heating effect is not too drastic for us. Nonetheless, we still decide to spin. Helps alleviate some of the heating effects on any given part, and considering the fact that we're coming in cinematic mode, that means that we can't see the heat gauges for if anything is overheating, so it's best to play it safe and rotate. So as you see here, we're going to come in well short of our goal of the desert launch site. That's what I was talking about, is I could have used some of that momentum, kept the lower engine stage a little bit longer, and I might have gotten closer. But anyways, we are no longer heating up, so now all we have to do is wait until we get to the appropriate height and stage our parachutes. It's going to be tense until they pop, because until then we can still hit the ground very hard. So they have popped at 1,300 meters above the surface. They actually fully extend and slow us down. So we're going to go ahead and speed up the footage a little bit, so that way it doesn't take nearly as long as it did for me to reach the surface safely. And we are in the desert with parallax, which means that we have nice scatter going around with these nice tall desert grasses and huge cacti. Glorious. Safe touchdown. We got a bunch of science. Bob went to Minmus and back. We're going to go back there in the next episode with a much more advanced capsule and a few more Kerbals. But that will be for the next episode. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.